Welcome back to Renter. I'm Oreo Thomas. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to the most discriminated, misunderstood, and marginalized people in society. And that, of course, is landlords. Today, we are interviewing an owner of several East Village lofts. Elon Fuck Your Face. Mr. Fuck Your Face, welcome.
Thank you. Call me Musk.
What?
I mean, Elon.
Okay.
Can I tell you the hardest thing about being a landlord?
Of course.
The hardest thing about being a landlord is critical race theory.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
And why is that?
I don't know. I wasn't told there would be follow-up questions.
What about turning off the heat on tenants during a brutal winter?
Well, like any job, there are upsides.
What, in your opinion, is the hardest thing about being a landlord?
Probably inflating the rent on what are obvious shitholes.
And what's difficult about that?
You don't always know what to do with all that money.
Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Now, let me get back to evicting the elderly.
Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at always and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romaka. And today we're discussing Rent from 2005 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and our YouTube channel. Joe is on Blue Sky at joedixon.bsky.social. Please tell your friends about us, even the ones who can drum a dog off of a balcony, and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 2005.
This movie about artists in the East Village has a mostly white cast, but there are blacks in it, two of whom are way more successful than the white folks, which strongly implies that racism didn't exist in the supposedly realistic and gritty musical.
About New York City.
About New York City.
In 1989.
And these two words, housing discrimination, don't seem to come up at all. In fact, when we have the discussion, George, you can tell me if I missed the scene where they have a protest for low-income housing.
It's not there, Joe. It's not there. They do not protest for that.
Okay, well, you answered my question before I even had a chance to ask. Well, I guess I did ask, but anyway. They have a protest, and I remember a woman asking people to move, but I don't recall her telling people to march on City Hall to demand cheaper rent. I thought maybe I missed it, but you're telling me, no, I'm right. Okay.
No, you didn't. I will say this, though.
Yes?
They do protest against landlords, which is a good start.
Or perhaps racial bias didn't exist in the late 80s when Rent takes place, but it sure existed in 2005 when this movie came out. George, read this headline from the New York Daily News.
Agencies settle with feds on housing bias.
What? That's weird. Turns out, according to this news article, 2 real estate agencies were found to have treated white apartment seekers better than black apartment seekers. Now, the agencies denied any wrongdoing, but they did agree to the following, quoting now, get training for all ages in the requirements of fair housing laws, maintain records that show compliance, display an equal opportunity logo in advertisements, remain subject to federal court jurisdiction for at least 3 years, and pay damages, fees, and costs at a total of $37,500, end quote. I love how in this country, the answer to fighting bigotry is having people take a class. You think folks would just know not to discriminate, but no, they need to be trained in not being bigots. Anyway, George, do you think these were just 2 bad apples? I'm sure real estate agencies treat black housing seekers and white housing seekers exactly the same these days, right?
I'm 100% certain that it was not just 2 bad apples. What I'm curious about is, shouldn't the feds have required them to display that equal opportunity logo after they had demonstrated an ability to be non-discriminatory?
What do you mean?
Because they said, you have to put this logo on.
Oh, before they've actually gone through even their training or anything.
Right.
To prove that they aren't bigots. Yeah.
Exactly. Apparently, equal opportunity is not a protected term.
They just wanted to make sure you get it up there as soon as possible.
Yep.
Well, HIV is very much a part of this film, so let's take a look at that from 2005. George, read this headline from Newsday.
New troubling strain of HIV found in city. Manhattan hospital patient's virus is highly resistant to drugs and progresses rapidly to full-blown AIDS.
Scary headline, but as we know today, that strain was not the beginning of a new deadlier HIV, thankfully. Still, at the time, there was concern. The strain was labeled 3-DCR HIV, and it resisted 3 of the 4 antiviral drug classes at the time. This patient had a resistance to 19 different drugs that combat the virus. Now, I had not heard of this, or at least I don't remember it, so I put 3-DCR HIV into the Google, and just based on the headlines, it was pretty spooky. Here are some of them. Alarming HIV strain, drug-resistant HIV, and deadly new strain, all from 2005 and up. Then, this headline from The Guardian in 2022. Third person apparently cured of HIV using novel stem cell transplant. I didn't read all these articles, so I have no idea how we traveled from death to, hey, we got a new process that may be a cure, but it's jarring as fuck. I don't know, maybe it's just the algorithms on my computer that did it. Who knows? Another search I did was naturally on the East Village. Here's what the papers were reporting. First, Ukrainian immigrants who had made the East Village their home could no longer afford to live there. However, their cultural touches remained. In fact, Veselka, a Ukrainian restaurant I've eaten at, still exists there as of this recording. Second, candidates for office in the East Village focus on affordable housing issues in that year, and probably in this year and in the years to come. Third, there was a campaign to save CBGB, a rock and roll bar that had opened in 1973 and whose lease had run out by 2005. The initials stood for Country Bluegrass Blues. It helped give a start to everyone from Madonna to the Ramones to the Talking Heads. And none of that would make a goddamn difference. The place would close for good in 2006.
I mean, it did make a difference to Madonna, the Ramones, and the Talking Heads.
I'm saying it didn't make a difference to keeping the place open.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to them, it made no difference. They were fine. But for the rest of us, we lost CBGB.
Mm-hmm.
And fourth and finally, this is from, again, Newsday headline, George.
The bohemian vibe of the unpaid gig. The open mic circuit is a loose-knit community driven by artistic taste and reminiscent of a grittier city.
This headline spells it M-I-K-E, Mike, like it's a person, but the mic is short for microphone and thus should be spelled M-I-C. Come on, Newsday. Even 19 years ago, you should have known better. Anyway, I was once a comic on the open mic circuit in that era, and it was hands down the most depressing and unfulfilling experience of my life. I don't know what open mics are like now, but holy shit, between playing to a bunch of other comics and having to pay to get up on stage, yes, pay to perform at a bar that would have been empty without us, you were guaranteed to feel really shitty about yourself. Or at least I did.
At least you weren't alone. A lot of the comics that were in that bar with you also felt like shit about themselves.
And some of them managed to go on to careers. I was not one of them. Okay, George, tell us about Rent.
Oh, you did go on to a career, just not as a stand-up comic.
Huh.
So this was directed by Chris Columbus. No, not the guy that purportedly discovered America. We've both seen his work in Home Alone, and I've seen his work in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, Mrs. Doubtfire, Bicentennial Man, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This was written by 2 people. The musical was written by Jonathan Larson. Larson lived and died in a 5th-floor loft with no heat in Lower Manhattan. He was 35 when he died, on January 25th, 1996, the day before Rent was to premiere off-Broadway. The cause of death was aortic dissection, which is when your arteries fail to keep your blood inside of them and allow it to flow into the wall layer of the vessel. It was misdiagnosed at 2 different hospitals.
Yeah, they were both sued. It was amazing. 2 hospitals with very good reputations, and both managed to miss it.
And it's not like they didn't try. Like, they did tests and stuff. They just missed it.
Yeah.
The screenplay for this was written by Steven Chbosky.
And how do you spell that?
Mostly consonants.
C-H-B-O-S-K-Y. I've never seen this last name before in my life.
I mean, you hadn't seen Romaka before either.
That's true.
But mine is easier to pronounce.
Yeah.
Blurb. IMDb says, in New York City's gritty East Village, a group of bohemians strive for success and acceptance while enduring the obstacles of poverty, illness, and the AIDS epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
They were going really hard for the rule of 3s there at the end. The illness was AIDS. So they're just kind of saying it twice by saying illness,
yeah, you're right. Illness
and the AIDS epidemic.
There was no other illness. It was only AIDS. Well, I guess it's drug addiction. Drug addiction, that's an illness.
I mean, they could have just written that then.
Why only one blurb?
Because I didn't want to do the parenthetical thing with YouTube.
Okay. Was it a really long one?
Yep. Before we get into the movie proper, this film has a lot of commentary about the arts and the struggles of artists. It does not talk at all about how all art is derivative. But this film, probably more than most, is an example of derivative art. This film was based on the 1996 Broadway musical Rent. That musical is based on the 1896 opera La Bohème, which itself was based on the 1851 novel Scenes of Bohemian Life. And I'm sure if we dug deep enough, that novel was influenced by other works of art as well. Now, on to our very derivative podcast about this movie based on a musical, based on an opera, based on a novel.
Now, we're not derivative.
No.
We have very original takes.
Yes. No.
What?
The film starts in its theater roots, with the main cast standing in a line on stage in an empty theater. They sing the song Seasons of Love. This is almost certainly the most well-known song from Rent.
And the best song from Rent, frankly. And
we even performed it in my first cycle with the Gotham Rock Choir. It's the only reason that I know how many minutes there are in a year, because the song says the number 525,600,000 over and over again. This song gives glimpses into things to come in the film, particularly the line that I got a solo in that first concert that goes, "In truths that she learned, or in times that he cried, in bridges he burned, or the way that she died." And I'm going to put an asterisk, a bullshit asterisk, on the way that she died.
Well, she does die. I assume that she is who we're thinking of, and she does die. She just comes back again like Jesus.
Yeah. The next song shares its title with the film itself. In Rent, our two main protagonists describe their lives as a pair of starving and freezing artists squatting in a loft in the East Village on Christmas Eve 1989. Mark is an attempted documentary filmmaker, while Roger is an angst-ridden songwriter. These two, and the rest of the tenants on at least this block, are all fed up with having to pay rent. The fact of that.
Not that it's too high.
Not that it's too high, just that they have to pay it. And are all burning things like eviction notices, posters, and screenplays to keep warm.
In the house. I was like, are you crazy? You're going to burn the place down, you lunatics.
I mean, yes, but also, like, people use their ovens to heat their homes in the winter and die of carbon monoxide poisoning. Like, it does not surprise me at all that people living in an industrial loft space would be burning things in a barrel in order to keep warm.
True. And we did that. As you know, I grew up on welfare. We had no heat plenty of times, and we sometimes had to use the oven to keep warm. We did turn it off, though, the whole carbon monoxide thing. These guys are like standing around burning. I don't know. It just seems like worse.
Hey, at least they took it and dumped it outside.
Which is even worse. All that paper down there could have caught fire. We would have had like a Chicago fire situation on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get into, well, we'll get into both these characters are fucked up. One, I can't wait to hear your relationship advice on one of them, because, like, dude, come on. But the documentary filmmaker, this guy is the worst filmmaker. All he does is pick his camera and point it at things. That's not documentary filmmaking.
Nope, sure isn't, Joe.
I could do that. You could do that. I'm not a documentary filmmaker. You gotta have a subject and story and shape it. He just puts his camera and stuff. And I'm such an artist. You're not an artist.
We get a brief introduction to their good old buddy Collins, Tom Collins, that they throw a key down to before he is run off to be beaten bloody by thugs.
Oh, that's another thing I love about this. I live in New York City. I lived in New York City at the time this film took place. I do not know why filmmakers and artists think New York is full of alleyways. This guy goes around down in the alleyway. Where are the alleyways in the East Village? I can think of a couple alleyways on Lower East Side. They're not in the East Village. And they are not nearly as many as they are depicted in film.
Yeah.
I mean, Spider-Man's constantly and Superman constantly going to alleyways. We don't have that many alleyways in New York City.
Definitely Batman.
And Batman. Well, Batman's in Gotham City, to be fair.
Which is just an analog for, like, Lower Manhattan.
New York City.
Mark Cohen is played by Anthony Rapp,
whom I've seen in 6 Degrees of Separation. And we've both seen in Road Trip.
And I've seen him in Twister, A Beautiful Mind, and Star Trek Discovery.
Okay, now, I'm only bringing this up because Kevin Spacey is in the news trying to make a comeback. So let's remind everyone that when Anthony Rapp was 14, Kevin Spacey, who was 26 at the time, tried to have sex with him. You know, just so we're clear on this, hey, let Kevin Spacey work again nonsense. Isn't having Nazi fuck Mel Gibson still working bad enough?
Apparently not, Joe.
And now Roger Davis is played by Adam Pascal, and for the podcast, we saw him in School of Rock. And Tom Collins is played by Jesse L. Martin, whom I've seen in Law & Order, the television show. And as a tribute to Tom, I am drinking a Tom Collins. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I seem to be slurring my words or saying a little out of it, it's because I got the drinky. By the way, it's bizarre to me they have a character named Tom Collins and no one says, what, the drink? Not once. Nobody seems to know that's a drink. He says Tom Collins a lot.
Yep. So, Joe, inform the listeners, what is in a Tom Collins?
Oh, of course, yes. It's gin and lemonade. That's it. Something special.
Gotcha. The next song is titled You'll See. Their old roommate turned rich landlord, Benjamin Coffin III, rolls up in his Range Rover to demand that Mark and Roger pay the year's worth of rent that he has let slide. That, or get Mark's ex-girlfriend Maureen to cancel a protest performance that she's scheduled for the following evening.
Why are they worried about this performance? I have no idea. Once we see it, if I was those landlords, I would have went home and there's nothing to worry about.
Yep. Now, Maureen left Mark for a lawyer named Joanne, a fact that Mark will be mocked for through the entire film.
Yes, this was a huge trope in that era. Men dated a woman who leaves them for another woman. Is that like a form of gay panic or something? It's just interesting how often that comes up a lot.
It is a form of homophobia, yeah, definitely. It's a form of, like, emasculating homophobia. Like, you couldn't satisfy her, so she went to women. That's the punchline of that joke, and it's garbage.
Yeah, that does seem to be the subtext there. Because, look, we saw it in Manhattan. We've seen it on the TV show, well, not we, but I know it was in the TV show Friends. I saw it on Seinfeld. It's just interesting how often that came again and again and again in that era. Hell, it may still now.
I'm going to go a little bit into polyamory stuff here for a second.
Sure.
There's a common thing that previously monogamous heterosexual couples or hetero-facing couples will do. And this is the lady in the relationship says, hey, I'm bi. And the guy says, well, you can only sleep with other women. And the root of that is a belief that she's not going to leave you for a woman, but she'll leave you for another man. So this is called a one penis policy. His penis. And I'm here to tell you it's garbage. Because if you don't trust your partner, it doesn't matter. They will leave you for somebody else.
Or they'll leave you for nobody else. They'll just
for nobody else. They don't even need to have somebody else to leave you.
No, that's
like,
the thing.
You either trust your partner or you don't.
Yeah, that is out of sight of polyamory. If your partner's going to cheat on you, they're going to cheat on you. So you need to trust them.
Well, it's not the cheating thing; it's the leaving thing.
Oh, whatever, the leaving thing. The point is, if the person wants to leave, they're going to leave. It's like,
yeah.
I always thought the guys were into polyamory because I thought, well, now I get to have two women in bed. And he doesn't want another guy.
That's the other side of that.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes really unequal. Because, yes, you can only sleep with women, and I can only sleep with women. So it's equal, right?
Benjamin Coffin III is played by Taye Diggs, who we've seen for the show in Brown Sugar, and who I've seen in How Stella Got Her Groove Back, Go, The Wood, and The Best Man, 1999.
And I've seen him in Chicago.
Another musical.
Yep. And Brown Sugar was about music.
Oh, that's right, yeah, but they don't sing in it.
When Benny leaves, Mark decides to go looking for Collins, while Roger decides to stay at home and brood. Mark reminds Roger to take his AZT, which is our signal that Roger is HIV positive. In episode 166 of this show, for the movie Jeffrey from 1995, we briefly discussed what AZT is. Here's a refresher, though. Azithromycin was the first antiretroviral medication used to prevent and treat HIV, the virus which causes AIDS, the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Roger sings one song, Glory. This song serves two purposes. One, it solidifies that Roger does indeed have HIV and how he got it. And two, it lets us know that he is going to spend the rest of the movie trying to write one great song before he dies that doesn't include a passage from Musetta's Waltz from La Boheme. He will fail, by the way. He will fail to not include Musetta's Waltz in his piece.
Also, I think it's there because it sort of lets us know, hey, he didn't get HIV, the bad way.
Well, Roger got HIV by sharing needles with his girlfriend April back when he had a band and, Hope. In the film, we see him and April reading an HIV test report indicating positive. We see that instead of what was in the musical, which was Roger describing how he found April in the bathroom with slit wrists and a note telling him that they both have HIV. We don't see that, even though it was filmed, because director Chris Columbus thought that might be too much for the audience.
Which is a real decision since Rent was a hit Broadway play and it was good enough for the audience there. Why did he think
he described it in the musical? They filmed her in the bathtub with slit wrists for the movie.
Oh, I see. You thought that might be. Well, even so, whatever. Artistic choice, I guess. First of all, I do not believe that this guy who wants to be a rock and roll star would have just one girlfriend. That's number one. I think he would be doing very well for himself, or at least trying to. I didn't even just believe, there's one woman he's dedicated to. Bullshit.
I know people who are frontmen in rock bands. They are not all getting laid.
No, but they all like to. No one gets into rock and roll to not get laid. But I don't care what they're telling you out there, George. They're not.
The next song, Light My Candle, introduces us to Mark and Roger's downstairs neighbor, Mimi. The building's electricity has been cut off, and she is up there asking if Roger can light a candle for her. She is very flirtatious with him, and he is very awkward and stammery. The scene introduces us to the fact that Mimi is a current heroin user, while Roger has quit the stuff. Mimi is also an exotic dancer at the nearby Cat Scratch Club.
Mimi Marquez is played by Rosario Dawson, who we've seen for the show in Sin City, and I've seen in Clerks 2, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, Kids, He Got Game, 25th Hour, and a bunch of TV shows such as Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist.
And I've seen her in Men in Black 2 and Zombieland Double Tap. A quick note, though. Everybody in the main cast of this movie was the original cast from the Broadway musical, except for Rosario Dawson and Tracy Thoms, who we'll get to later.
Okay.
Originally, Mimi was played by Daphne Rubin Vega, but she was pregnant at the time of this film being cast and filmed, so she wasn't really available to do it.
Wait, did you see the original production?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I assume you enjoyed it?
Yeah. I brought my in-laws to it. My super conservative Christian in-laws.
You told me this, yes.
My gay brother-in-law.
That's right. No,
yep.
What did you, I guess maybe we'll get into it. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit now. What do you think of his treatment of Mimi? Because I found his treatment of Mimi really weird throughout this entire film.
Well, he's a giant push-pull machine. He's got that dynamic. Like, he pushes her away and then he pulls her back. Pushes her away, pulls her back. That's his fucking mojo.
But why?
I will get into that a little bit.
Okay. Because they seem to, at least initially, it seems to be, it's because he's HIV positive. Something that he could still talk to her about. It's not like she'd be shocked or something. She's not like this isn't Boston and she's a Catholic girl and going to Catholic church or something. It's like, he totally have told her from the very beginning. I just found it weird.
Okay. Mark never does find Collins, but somebody does. He is happened upon by Angel, a bucket drumming street performer, who offers to take him home and tend his wounds.
You know what I thought the moment I heard this guy? I've never seen this before. Never saw the Broadway Broadway musical. Never saw this movie. As soon as I heard this dude's name was Angel, I thought, he's going to die. As soon as I heard, I was like, oh, God, come on. Really? He's going to die, isn't he?
This becomes easier to navigate once they both admit that they are HIV positive, even though two people having HIV doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea for them to do anything that could transmit it to the other, because there were multiple strains of HIV and increasing the viral load in your body was always a bad thing. Pin in that.
Maybe that's how we got 3CR, whatever the thing I was telling you about.
Yeah. In the morning, Collins arrives at the loft with gifts of booze and food paid for by Angel. The characters in this film will refer to Angel using he, him, and she, her pronouns. I am going to use they, them, because my read of Angel's character is gender fluid. I am happy to be corrected on that if anybody feels the need to do so.
I assume that at the time he was writing this, he just didn't know what the language was.
Which is weird for somebody who's going to write such a queer-centric play.
Well, not really.
You're correct. White people have a habit of writing about things they know nothing about. Never mind.
No. That's not even what I'm saying. A lot of gay people didn't have the language for a lot of things at the time. So not unusual. I mean, I don't know how much you know about gay marriage, but that actually was a time a lot of gay people were against it. It was very controversial. They were seen as the conservative position.
Yeah, no, that it was seen as, oh, why do we want to be like the normies?
Yes.
Yeah. Angel Dumont Chenard is played by Wilson Germain Herrera. Angel enters dressed in a sexy Santa Claus getup and does a song and dance number called Today for You about how they lucked into a financial windfall when a rich person asked them to annoy a neighbor's dog until it died. They drummed on their bucket until...
After an hour, Evita in all her glory on the window ledge of that 23rd story, like Thelma and Louise did when they got the blues, one dove into the courtyard of the Gracie Muse.
Rent is set in 1989, 2 years before Thelma and Louise came out. Oops.
So he killed a dog.
Yep. I mean, they convinced the dog to kill itself.
Yeah, that's not how that works. He killed the dog.
Okay.
He straight up murders a dog. Completely glossed over, not seen as a big deal by anybody. Nobody goes like, what? What did you just say? What did you do?
Yep.
Which means he could run for office as a Republican.
Mm-hmm. Mark gets a phone call from Maureen asking him to go down to the performance space and help Joanne get the audio working. He complies and is, of course, mocked for doing so, because you can't just do nice things for a woman if you used to put your penis inside her.
That's another thing. These guys are supposed to be somewhat progressive. It's weird that they have that attitude.
Mm-hmm. At the performance space, he finds Joanne. They both sing and dance the Tango Maureen. This song tells us that Maureen is a habitual cheater who, unwisely, has a tell in that she begins to call her partner Pookie when she has been unfaithful. After Mark fixes the audio, Joanne gets a call from Maureen, who calls her Pookie, which sets us up for a fightin' song later. Joanne Jefferson is played by Tracy Thoms, who I've seen in The Devil Wears Prada. She was not the original Joanne. Freddie Walker was the original player of Joanne, but she was the oldest member in the main cast during the stage production, and she wasn't offered a role in the film due to her age.
Oh.
Because it would be weird for Maureen to be with somebody that old.
How old was she?
Significantly older than the rest of the cast. She did, though, request that the producers cast an actress of African descent for the film.
That wasn't in the Broadway production?
I mean, Freddie Walker was black. And she's like, yeah, okay, I get it, I'm too old, but at least get a black woman in the role.
Okay.
So they did.
But I thought that was in the script anyway, so it would have been weird. Well, I guess.
It is never mentioned.
Okay.
Collins and Angel attend a meeting of Life Support, a support group for people with HIV/AIDS, and the name of this song. Mark attends with them awkwardly and gets permission to film for his documentary. The theme here is that there's no guaranteed tomorrow, so we must live for today.
Okay, sure.
Come nighttime, Mimi sings a song called Out Tonight, in which she asks Roger to take her out tonight. This is followed by Another Day, where Roger gets angry and defensive, pushing Mimi away because he's afraid of commitment, he's afraid of vulnerability, and deep down he's afraid of transmitting HIV. That is why he's that kind of asshole. He's also that kind of asshole because he's got a lot of toxic masculinity and mononormativity in him, so he can't imagine shit later, but we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But it still doesn't explain why he just doesn't tell her. And in fact, they have a song, don't they? Like, I should tell her.
They'll tell each other later.
Well,
they don't tell each other yet because they need dramatic tension.
You mean because the script says so?
Exactly.
Okay.
We go back to Life Support for the first of the songs in this that tend to make me cry.
Aww.
And yeah, fuck you too.
What? I said all.
You've made it very clear already in this movie what you think about it, but here's the thing. I was a teenager when this came out, and this played a lot. Like, I listened to this musical a lot. Like, it was a lot of what my initial exposure to anything not heteronormative was.
All right. Okay.
So, like, I have this, I know every note in this song. I can sing every song in this thing. And it affects me. Like, this is a freaking hard line to my cry circuits that I just don't feel a need to deprogram.
Okay. You shouldn't. No one's suggesting you do. I said, oh, because, oh, you cried.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, My feelings about the play are different from maybe my feelings about this film. I never saw, I should say the musical. I never saw the musical. I have no doubt if I had seen the musical, I probably would have loved it. There are things in it, this thing I think is fantastic and wonderful. But I'm just judging the movie. And as the movie, well, I have issues.
So does the movie. In Will I, the only words are this.
Will I lose my dignity? Will someone care? Will I wake tomorrow from this nightmare?
It is sung in a round by all in the support group, which is joined by Roger, who has taken a step and left the loft to be with his friends. In a round, for those who don't know, is kind of like if you sing row, row, row your boat and you each start at a different time, it still makes sense and sounds good all together. After the meeting, they happen upon a homeless woman being harassed by the police. Mark uses his camera to scare them off, but the homeless lady is not grateful, insisting that her life is not there to be used for Mark to make a name for himself.
Mm-hmm. I assume that was for the movie and not in the...
That was absolutely in the play.
Oh, was it? Okay.
In the musical, yeah. Except it was sung in the musical. Everything that was just spoken in this was sung in the musical.
Ah. I assume they did that for time. Well, you don't know. Or did you? Do you read up? Do you know why they decided to make it dialogue as opposed to a song?
This movie is about half the length of the musical.
Ah. So, yeah, they probably did it for timing. I just love the idea that if you put a camera on cops, it'll scare them away. Boy, did he get that wrong.
And now we don't even have to process the film. We can upload it direct. We can stream it live to millions of people.
Because if they get a hold of that camera, they'll fucking smash it.
Yep.
Or arrest you. Something they probably would have done to Mark.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you're interfering with the police work. Because that's the bullshit they say now.
Yep. Mark, Roger, Collins, and Angel take an F train to somewhere while singing Santa Fe, an aspirational song about them all opening up a restaurant in New Mexico. Mark and Roger go off to help Maureen set up her show, while Angel takes Collins shopping for a new coat since his got stolen by the thugs that beat him up at the start of the movie. They walk through a flea market singing I'll Cover You, a song about finding safety and shelter within a relationship. Roger hangs around where he knows Mimi gets her heroin. He apologizes to her for the way he acted the night before and asks her to go to Maureen's protest with him. She says yes. Maureen Johnson is played by Idina Menzel,
who I've seen in Uncut Gems.
And I've heard in Frozen. Maureen's protest song is called Over the Moon, and is rich in Hey Diddle Diddle the Cat and the Fiddlery.
I found that to be the most self-indulgent bullshit I've ever seen in my life. I really... I had really no deep feelings about Maureen, and then when I see her up there with that whole moo and trying to do with the crowd, and she doesn't say anything. This is the worst protest I've ever seen in my life. It seems all to be about her. It seems very self-indulgent. I really disliked her there. Did you think it was powerful? How did it look in the musical?
I think you read it perfectly, and I think it was exactly that.
I think that was intentional.
The reaction of the crowd is unbelievable. But I believe from Maureen's character that she would absolutely do something like that because she is that kind of person.
But does the movie or the musical know that?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So we both saw the same thing. All right.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they know that.
I don't either. I don't think Jonathan Larson knew what a protest was. Like, the only thing he got right was police starting to beat people for nothing.
And then they'll turn off the heat in your apartment, yeah.
Yeah. Benny and his investors are in attendance. The cops are on standby. Maureen ends the show asking the assembled to moo with her.
You've probably been to more protests than I have, but I think we've been to our fair share of protests. What would you do if someone was up there telling you, hey, let's moo together?
I mean, I would probably just start mooing because I'm that guy. I'm the first guy to start doing the thing just because it's more fun to do that.
Okay.
Like, it's more fun to be mooing than standing there not mooing while somebody's asking you to moo.
I don't know. I just she doesn't tell us to go do anything. It's like, oh, God. Oh, that annoyed the hell out of me.
The best read of this is she was setting it up to be like an early Occupy type thing where they would just sit in place and moo at the cops instead of letting themselves be moved out.
Oh, now that's clever, but I don't think that's what was there. But that's a good, like, move. I like that.
Yeah.
They're very smart, George, but no, I don't think that particular section is that smart.
I mean, I'm older than Jonathan Larson was when he died, so I've had a little bit more experience in wordplay. Mm-hmm. I've written at least a musical's worth of summaries and, parody cold opens for the show. Mm-hmm. So the crowd begins to moo, and as they all start mooing together, the police get jumpy.
For some reason.
They start pushing people around. Well, you know how the cops are when people start acting in concert. It's the scariest thing in the world to them for people to be united doing anything.
Perhaps. I don't know if mooing would really do it for them, but I don't know. I mean, oink, oink, oink. That would have set them off.
Yeah. Eventually, the nightsticks come out. The place erupts into a riot, and the core characters barely escape. All but Mark, it seems, at first. So the core cast minus Mark meet up at the Life Cafe and all get introduced to each other. The Life Cafe was a real place in the East Village that I'd been to twice, once with my ex and once with my oldest before it closed permanently in 2012. Jonathan Larson wrote much of Rent there. They're joined shortly by Mark, who answers the waitstaff's concerns about his repeated inability to pay for tea with a stack of money that he got for selling his footage of the riot to Buzzline, a sleazy cable tabloid. Also in the cafe are Benny and his investors, for some fucking reason. I mean, because the script said so is why.
Yes.
This is perhaps the second most well-known song from Rent, La Vie Bohème. It is a list song with topics ranging from sexual identities to sexual acts, artists and playwrights, philosophers and technologies, and a bunch of other things. It is basically an excuse for the cast and extras to party because they actually turned the filming of that scene into a party for the cast and crew.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Benny and company leave in disgust.
Because they can't sing, I guess. Well,
mostly because Joanne and Maureen keep making out in front of them.
Probably that too. Oh, that's right. She shows her ass to them as well.
Yep.
She moons them.
Mm-hmm. Moons.
Ooh.
Mimi pulls Roger aside to ask why he's been ignoring her all night when he's the one who asked her out.
Good question.
Yep. When their beepers go off, reminding both of them to take their AZT, they finally understand that they have matching baggage. In fact, that is a lyric in the song, I'm looking for baggage that goes with mine. There's a musical interlude called I Should Tell You, where they sneak out back and tentatively get the ball rolling on their romance, which they are freer to do now that they both know that they both have HIV. Here's that, and this is that pin. Because even if they both have it, they can absolutely make each other worse if they're not careful.
Mm-hmm. To be fair to the Mr. Larson, Jonathan Larson, and to the film and to the, well, by 2005, we actually did know better. So I guess maybe not for the film, for the original production.
But the film is still set in 1989.
Yeah, but they still knew better by then. They could have just not had that in there or something, gotten around it, I guess.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't know.
They return to the cafe for the finale of La Vie Bohème. In the stage production, this is where the intermission was.
Ah.
And in the movie, it's like almost 2/3 of the way through the movie. There's a reprise of Seasons of Love that brings us to New Year's Day 1990. Roger, Mimi, Mark, and Collins are returning to the loft, which they find padlocked with an eviction notice on the door. Angel busts them in, and they find all their belongings have been removed. Joanne says that since they're inside, they're squatters, which gives them time to get money together. So I did a quick search on squatters' rights in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And it currently stands that if you occupy a building for 30 days or more, you are a tenant. And you cannot just be evicted. You have to go through a legal process to do that. And this has been abused by some people who, like, people have bought houses here when they didn't live here yet. And people just moved into those houses, and then people couldn't get into their own home because their home was being squatted. But squatters' rights are there because of unethical landlords. But now there is a push to lengthen the time that someone would have to occupy a building to 6 months rather than 30 days. So that's still a push in favor of landlords, but there are people who are like making it hard for people to even move.
All right.
So it's a lot of fuckery.
I got nothing to add.
Yep. So Mark goes to Buzzline. He brings Joanne for legal advice and Maureen because she thinks Mark is only getting this job because of her. Joanne sees Maureen flirting with a receptionist and still manages to help Mark get an advance on his documentary. On the sidewalk, Joanne confronts Maureen about the flirting. Maureen says all Joanne needs to do is ask. So Joanne asks Maureen to commit explicitly to monogamy with her. And this acts as a proposal to which Maureen happily agrees. Pin in that.
Okay, now, of all the relationships in here that I thought were kind of bullshit, at least this one I understood more, and I can understand, even though I think Maureen's a terrible character in this sense, I agree with her. Joanne is entirely too much. I mean, she's just talking to these other women. Even she's flirting. So what? She's not having sex with these people. They're just flirting. What the woman is way too possessive. If you think, what is it, Mark, the rock singer, you think he has toxic problems, Joanne also has serious possession problems.
Well, Roger is the guitar player.
Sorry,
Mark
Roger,
is the filmmaker.
Mark is the documentary. Sorry, I'm bad at names.
The thing is, Maureen is not meant to just be flirting. When she's not on camera and Joanne is, Maureen is cheating on her.
You think she is cheating? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then break up.
Not too long from then, that pair's parents throw them an engagement luncheon. This was well before Obergefell.
Mm-hmm.
The toasts are pleasant enough, but once again, Maureen is seen flirting with the waitstaff. So we can pull that pin right out now, because Maureen chooses right now to polybomb Joanne. For those who don't know, polybombing is when one is monogamous with somebody and then, out of the blue, says, I am polyamorous and you just have to deal with that now. Maureen doesn't use the word polyamory or anything like that, but she does make it perfectly clear that Joanne can expect Maureen to be getting the attention of and reciprocating the attention of other men and women forever. Well, there's always another option, and that option is to break up. So that's what happens.
You know, so you think Maureen, I did not get the impression Maureen was actually cheating, but regardless, she has no control if other people are flirting with her. I mean, in that sense, she's right. That's going to be happening forever. And what, no one's ever hit on Joanne?
No, but she could not flirt back in front of her fiancé at their engagement luncheon.
I don't know that she was really flirting in front of her. She was talking to this woman, and Joanne took it as flirtation. I don't know. I just found Joanne I thought she was too possessive.
Alrighty. When they return to the loft, they find that all their stuff is back. And Benny is there too. He offers them carte blanche and a free stay courtesy of Cyber Arts, the studio that he wants to build. Because Mimi came and had a talk with him and changed his mind. Apparently they used to be a thing. Roger can't handle his jealousy over this and breaks up with Mimi. Now, this does seem wildly possessive and toxic. However, in the musical, Benny stokes that fire. Benny's like, she came to see me. My legs are still sore. She was on my desk. Like, basically implying heavily that
They had sex.
he slept with Mimi, and that's why he's giving them a break.
Yeah, that's not in the picture. And the picture just comes off as, I talked to him. How dare you speak with your
Well, they went to
girlfriend?"
dinner. They went to a dinner.
Or they went to dinner, and that's what seems to upset him. He comes off as a real jerk there.
He is. Yeah, well, yeah. And he is. Mark rejects Benny's deal and writes him a check for rent to carry them over for a while from his advance from Buzzline. The next song is titled Without You, and it's the second point in the movie that almost always gets me crying. It is a sad and I think beautiful song, and it's weird for me to describe it like that because it's also another Liszt song. And Liszt songs are kind of a mixed bag.
Define that. What do you mean by Liszt song?
I'll define it through example.
Okay.
Harry Truman, Doris Day, Red China, Johnny Ray, South Pacific, Walter Winchell, Joe DiMaggio.
Ah. They're just rattling off
Lists of
names.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is sung by Mimi and Roger, but also includes scenes from Life Support where as the camera pans, some of the attendees fade out because that's what happens in a support group for people with a terminal illness. Mimi goes back to using heroin, which further alienates her from Roger. By the end of the song, she's back in Benny's arms, and he must be practicing some kind of non-monogamy with his rich white wife, almost certainly not an ethical version. We also watch Angel succumb to some kind of opportunistic infection, and they die in Colin's arms. And now it's Halloween, Angel's favorite holiday. In the stage production, a church won't actually allow Angel to be buried in their cemetery because bigotry. I guess they decided that would be too much for the audience, too. So, the cast give their testimonies and remembrances of Angel, and Collins does a heartbreaking reprise of I'll Cover You.
By the way, that I'm sure anyone listening to this involves rent and nose, but just so it's clear, that was very real. The churches were very much would not bury people with AIDS. If you were openly gay, they didn't want to bury you.
Yeah. After the funeral, there is a lot of infighting. Roger sold his guitar, bought a car, and now he's moving out to Santa Fe, New Mexico. So not only did Collins just lose Angel, but he's losing Roger too. And Mark is losing his best friend. So it kind of sucks all around. It does lead to Maureen and Joanne getting back together though, so there's that.
And why is that?
Because the script said so.
Ah, okay.
Now we get the song, You're What You Own, which feels really jarring after, like, this whole funeral scene. To me. Like, it just
seemed out of place.
Yeah. And this is all about Roger having moved out to New Mexico, it not solving any of his problems, and him moving back home.
Now, how long is that in the musical? Because it just seemed like one scene he's in New Mexico, next scene he's back.
Yeah, that's the span of one song.
Oh, okay.
Yep. With Roger back home and winter settling in, Benny calls and asks for their help in finding Mimi, who dropped out of rehab and maybe is using heroin again. There's a montage of everybody looking for her. Then it's Christmas Eve again, this time 1990. They're getting ready to have a little bit of celebration when, on the street, they hear Maureen screaming to let them in because they found Mimi in a park. They bring her up to the loft and put her on a table with Roger, who sings the song that he finally managed to write, though he has still not managed to do so without invoking Musetta's waltz. He sings Your Eyes to her, and then she dies. And then, inexplicably, she's not dead.
Well, she has a reason.
She coughs a couple of times, says that she was headed towards the light, but Angel told her that Roger's waiting for her, so she should go back to him.
See? She had a good explanation. On Christmas Eve.
Yep.
Just like who? Who also comes back? Should have on Easter, but...
Maureen, the doctor, touches her forehead and diagnoses that her fever is breaking.
We don't know what Maureen studied. Maybe she did study medicine.
Well, we know that what she has not studied is the electric cello, because they say that in La Vie Boheme.
Ah.
And Maureen Johnson, back from her spectacular one-night engagement at the 11th Street lot, will perform Native American tribal chants backwards through her vocoder while accompanying herself on the electric cello, which she has never studied. That is the line from La Vie Boheme that addresses what Maureen may or may not have studied.
And that she does, what, Indian face? Or is that not appropriation? But
I mean, Native American tribal chants... So just vocalizing, but doing it backwards through a vocoder.
The way it was meant to be done, no doubt.
They sing a refrain of Another Day and screen Mark's documentary. The film ends on a still shot of Angel from that documentary. The end.
Mark's documentary looks like shit. Just like, this looks terrible. This is a series of clips. It's terrible. All right. Since I've started it off, I will say right up front, no, I don't think it works. I think it's a very dated piece of work. Again, I repeat, I'm sure if I had seen the original musical, I probably wouldn't, I still wouldn't have loved this movie, but I probably would have loved the musical because I'm sure look, people singing, heartfelt, I like anyway. So I'm a sucker for that. They probably would have won me over there. But as a dramatic piece, as a movie, I think this is dated. I think it's a lot too much wrong. I don't think they understood the characters, or at least I don't think it's like what you said about when we were talking about Do the Right Thing, when Mookie throws a trash can through the window and Spike Lee says, well, it's because of this reason. And you said, well, that's not what's on the screen. That's what you thought he'd throw it through. It's like, and you know, artists think they're doing one thing, but when you look at it, the final completed work, you see what you see. And there are things in the film I don't think Larson or Chris Columbus seem to understand. Oh, that's bullshit. That's terrible. That shouldn't be in there. That's nonsense. Even for 1989, yes, obviously some things are going to get wrong regardless because it's a historical piece and people are going to know better. Okay, I'll let all that go. I just find it extremely dated. And for myself, I really like Seasons of Love. I think that is a fantastic song. Truly a great song. The rest of the songs left me cold. Did nothing for me. So, it doesn't work for me. George?
I'm actually inclined to agree with you. Even though this has a hard line to my amygdala, that's because I grew up and entered adulthood surrounded by this. The fact that even I, who grew up and entered adulthood surrounded by this, can't watch it without trying to, like, understand Angel better than the movie portrays them. Because Angel is referred to as a he, him, a she, her, and is a drag queen. At no point does Angel exhibit a preference for any of these.
Good point.
Angel never identifies who they are to us. And the fact that the rest of the characters are so cavalier about just using whatever pronouns and Angel being fine with everything doesn't seem like that's not, I don't know. That is the least believable thing about this movie to me. Because we know so much more now about dysphoria and how people's gender presentation can differ from their inside experience. Angel was written almost to be an exemplar of that, but this movie, Jonathan Larson, bless his heart, didn't have the awareness to do anything with it. So on that point, like, it's hard for me to watch it again. Also, and I hate to say this, a lot of the lyrics are kind of clunky. Like, even as a musical, I don't think it was the best writing. And I think Jonathan Larson probably would have made changes to it had he lived.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I just don't think it works. Basically, yeah, because it's dated. And looking through a lens of today, I can't just take it with its historical context. I have to take it also knowing what I know now, because it's dealing with themes that don't have enough historical context to carry it in cinema. Like, there's not enough cinema getting it right. So anything that like this that doesn't can't work anymore. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I understand what you're saying completely.
Okay.
And just one more point, and I think your excellent points on Angel. I get the impression, look, I don't know, but I get the impression Jonathan Larson didn't actually talk to any trans people.
Not that he was aware of.
Yeah, so that's the impression I get from just the way this is written. Why name him Angel then die? Come on, that was so on the nose. I was like, oh, that's bad writing. I'm sorry. It telegraphed what was going to happen. I mean, I knew it as soon as I said. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. They should have he should have done a bit more research. I know it's a musical, so you're not going through absolute realism, obviously.
Right.
But if you're going to have that sort of
and
character in it,
the sweetest milk I had ever tasted. Wasn't realistic for you?
If you're going to have these type of characters, it would help to at least. Yes, not, just talking to a few people, it doesn't mean you're representing the entire group. But I imagine it would have been a stronger character had he done some research. And to me, it's not clear that he did. It felt very much, again, I'll reference again, Friends or sitcoms from the 90s who had no better idea about trans people. So, yeah, all right, we said our piece. This was a Patron's Choice episode, and the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are G.I. Blues from 1960, G.I. Jane from 1997, and G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra 2009. If you want to vote but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, we'll be going further down our GI tract.
Hey!
And talking about Full Metal Jacket from 1987. That is a patron's reward choice for our longest-serving patron, Aaron. He's been saving his patron rewards for a few years, so he's got that and 2 more, making it a variably militarily themed June.
So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romaka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's nobody around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros. It doesn't matter.
No day but
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
Alarming HIV strain.
They're headlines. Shouldn't I read them?
You will get your chance again.
Okay.